Hello, we are here again, women educating women on financial topics. And we have with us today Terra Van Zant, a CPA, Soojin Kim, an estate planning attorney, and myself, Sheryl Smith, who is a broker realtor. We are all in the greater Sacramento area. And what we're talking about today is there's a lot of people leaving California. What is the impact from a business perspective, from a financial perspective of this mass exodus from California? So we're going to change it up in terms of order sequence this time and start with Soojin, because last time we started with Terra. So we'll start with Soojin and just hear about things from your side.
Okay, so a lot of clients, as soon as they see me, the first thing they'll say is, well, we're planning on retiring, out of state. Does that matter? Yes, it does. And the reason is estate planning. So when we talk about estate planning, let's think about a trust. Just thinking about the trust right off the bat, that's a contract. That's a legal contract. And then the trust that I execute, they say we are going to abide by the laws of the state of California. So if you ever left California and let's say you ended up in Montana and they have different laws as to the trustees' powers or authorities, then yeah, that would make a difference. So when people ask me, does it matter? Well, yes and no. So if you think about having an estate plan here and you have your property here and your trustee is here and the beneficiaries are in California, then great, we can leave that. And if you happen to move out, but you still have property and your beneficiaries in California, then it makes sense to just keep your California trust and to just update it as necessary. But if you move out of state and you purchase property, let's say you move to Idaho and you purchase property in Idaho and all your beneficiaries go with you to Idaho and your trustee is also in Idaho, then that might be a situation where it makes sense for you to then update or to create a new trust in the state of Idaho, because everything you're doing, the property that you own, the people that are going to take once in your absence, it's all in Idaho and it'll all have to abide by the state law in Idaho. So if everything moves to a different state, then yes, absolutely, that would be a situation where you'd want to establish a new trust. But like I said, if everything else stays back in California, then it might be a situation where you just keep your California trust. Because if you have a valid California trust, then it's technically valid. And other states, even if it's other probate courts, they'll still, validate it and they'll still honor it because it is a legal document that you entered before you passed. But if you're in a situation where you're moving from a state that does not have a state level estate tax, like California, we do not have a state level estate tax. So all we have to do is worry about the federal level, the threshold of 11.58 million. So that's a pretty high number to work with. But like in the state of New York, they do have a state level estate tax, and that takes you only up to 5.8 million. So if you had a California trust that was drafted, it was probably drafted with the 11.58 number and not the 5.85. So if you're moving in between states where they have different taxes at the state level, then yes, that would also be another situation where you'd probably want to create a new trust. But the other documents that come along with your estate plan, so your powers of attorney and your advanced healthcare directive, those you would want to update to meet your new state laws, just because those are the first documents that you're going to use, because that's when you're incapacitated, and those you would want to update to the new state.
Wow. Well, that was a lot.
I know.
And those of you who are listening, I hope that you're hearing that there's a lot of nuances to moving outside of the state that you're in. And so the documents that you have, as Soojin pointed out, there's implications of that.
Right.
And so if you are thinking about a move, you may want to reach out to representation. Soojin Kim is in El Dorado Hills, if you want to use her help, or if you have someone that has prepared your trust documents, you may want to have that conversation with them before you get to the new state.
Exactly.
You have enough things to think about with that new location without having a surprise that you did not anticipate. So I was taking notes on that, Soojin, because there are some things that I've had 3 clients who sold homes this year and who moved out of state, and I was not thinking about any of that. So I will be sending them a copy of this recording to make sure that they get that rectified.
Oh,
Thank you so much for that.
And I think it would behoove everyone to consult your CPA before you make these big moves, obviously. But because there are tax implications to moving out of state, talking to someone like Terra would be the first place to start, because are the taxes different? If so, how? And then how does that affect my estate planning that I already have? So I think that's a good natural progression.
Perfect. Which is a perfect segue into Terra Van Zant, talking about it from a CPA's perspective, this mass exodus from California. Terra?
Yeah, actually, that is basically what I was going to say in generalizing. When I talk to clients, because they will call me and ask what they need to do because they're moving out of state. Sometimes they're moving into state too, and what needs to happen. And that is pretty much what I tell them is you have to know what the other state requirements are also. So that's something you have to think about, because they're not going to be the same. All the states have different requirements. They all have different thresholds. They all have different taxes, different amounts of tax you have to pay. So it's good to understand what state you're moving into and what the taxes you're going to have to pay there are, and what filings you have to do. And then it's also a good idea to keep in mind that if you move out of California, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're still not a resident. California is one of the most aggressive states as far as taxes go. And so when you move out of the state, if you don't cut ties, they will still try to tax you. So that's something to talk about too, because it's not a real black and white area. You have to be really careful. They want you to basically have a driver's license in the other state. If you still have family here, your immediate family, your wife or your husband lives here in California, then sometimes it can be really hard to cut ties, and you may still be considered a resident. You may still have to pay tax here. So just because you leave California does not necessarily mean you're not considered a resident. So that's something to keep in mind. And just talk through it with your tax advisor as far as what things you have to look at, what your circumstances are, and whether or not you would still be considered a resident. And then you could also be a resident for part of the year in each state. So there's a lot of complication to state taxation. So it's really important to talk to your advisor. I suggest before leaving, but I mean, if you have to do it after the fact, it's always a good idea to do it before you have to, the year end though, before you have to file a tax, start going through that process. So, yeah. And then as far as the states, that's the same thing. Estate and trust, it's complicated in California. If your trustee is here, then you're still taxed here a lot of the time. So there's also things like that you have to think about. Do you want to be taxed in California on your estate when you pass away? I mean, there's things like that as far as your the income that you make from your estate. Soojin was talking about states in general and if you get taxed on that, but there is also income taxation as well. So you have to be careful with that too. So it's just really important to talk to somebody about it to understand all the differences based on the states you're moving to.
Got you. So, okay, terrified about moving out of California at this point. Well, my grandchildren are in California. So I am not looking at moving from California at this time, but still a little terrified. But that's good for me to know when I'm representing clients who are looking at moving out of state. Now, just a quick question. Is it possible that somebody could be taxed as both, for example, a Texan and a Californian for the entire year? Because like you said, just because they move, it doesn't mean they're not a resident.
Generally, you're a resident of one or the other, but if you do get taxed on all your income, sometimes people do. I will see that where they'll get taxed on all their income in both states. But there's a what's called an other tax credit, and Texas doesn't have any income tax, but I just had to say that. But there's something called an other state tax credit that will usually will help get rid of any double taxation, so you don't get taxed twice on the same income.
Okay, great.
So, yeah, so there's things like that, and then businesses, if you have businesses, then there's a kind of a different process. So it's a long conversation depending on your situation.
So again, like with what Soojin was talking about, this, by way of disclaimer, overall, this is not specific information. Your situation, anyone watching this, it's up to you to do your own investigation with the professionals who understand your situation. So this is not to be construed as legal advice or tax advice. It's just, in general, some things for you to think about. So now talking about the real estate side of things, one of the things that as I shared earlier, I've had 3 transactions where the sellers moved out of state earlier this year. And the thing that I noticed with all of them was that they really had a huge, they were excited about where they were going, but there were a lot of question marks about where they're going. Anytime someone sells a home and buys a home, whether they're leaving the state of California or not, there's going to be concerns. However, when you're going to a state that is unfamiliar to you, that level of concern gets bigger because of the unknown. So I'm not going to get into the taxes or the estate planning component, but I will say that there are people who leave the state of California and find that where they went to was unacceptable, and then they want to come back. And one of the problems with that situation is once they've sold their California home, which they have generally always paid less money for, when they want to come back, they oftentimes can't afford to buy a home again because they lost that foothold. And that part can be very upsetting to them, because they look at it and go, man, and I've had them say it, I wish I hadn't sold my home. Now, I don't know if that was a function of not having done the proper homework or, whatever, but do your homework, not only on the tax, not only on the estate planning component, but also on the place where you're going. So maybe you want to rent for a while. If you're going to sell your home, you need to be relatively certain that you don't want to come back, because you might be priced out of California. The second thing that I've noticed is that with so many people leaving California, you would think that we would have more inventory in California because these people are selling their homes. We still have extremely low inventory. Now, I haven't done any sort of a survey or anything to know, are most of the people that are leaving the state of California, are they primarily homeowners? Are there a lot of renters leaving the state of California? Because obviously, if there's a lot of renters leaving the state, then that's not going to have an impact at all on inventories. But it is a question that's on my mind, because I would think that we would have more inventory with so many people leaving the state. The other thing that, oh, you heard about tax from the perspective of the CPA and from the estate planning. But the other part is Texas is a prime example because the taxes are so different. People look at the cheap prices of homes in Texas and go, oh yeah, it's going to be really inexpensive to live there. Well, as is true no matter where you live, the cost of housing is only part of what you pay. And so you have to do the complete analysis of the location that you're going to make sure that it really is a more affordable place. Because I am aware of many people who were stunned to find out about the Texas taxes as it relates to when they bought a home. And some of them were the ones that came back. Maybe the lifestyle was different. I don't know. Too many cattle, whatever. But they maybe just were not aware of the changes in the expenses that they would have, not just the price of the house. So whether you're looking at buying a home in California or any place, don't just look at the price of the home. There's a lot of different variables to be aware of. And as is true with Soojin and Terra, it's important for you to have proper representation that takes into account what your situation is. Now, your realtor that is in an area that you know, such as my clients, if they're looking at moving across the country, I have relationships across the country and can refer them to a great agent where they're going, rather than sort of throwing a dart at the wall and hoping that they find somebody that's good at what they do. So it's important to leverage your relationships when you're moving to a new place, especially when it comes to housing. Your realtor, your trusted realtor where you are, can be a strong resource there. So those are some things for you to consider from different angles financially. And I hope the overall picture that you're hearing is do your homework before you move. That is just the best practice to make sure that once you get where you're going, that you're actually happy with that decision, rather than feeling regret because you didn't know this, that, or the other thing. Soojin, did you have any closing remarks?
Just it's funny that you mentioned that you have referrals, because that's something that I'm starting to do. Is a lot of my clients are moving out to Idaho and Wisconsin and Texas. So I've started to reach out to estate planning attorneys out there, just so I have someone to refer my clients to, because they have no idea. They're new in that state. So I think it is important for us to build that network too, so that we can make sure our clients are taken care of properly, because there are so many factors to consider. And just talk to your CPA. I think they'll be the best source to get you going, to help you figure out, okay, is this a good idea? Is this not a good idea? How much do we need to change? And then if you have estate planning already, then talk to your attorney and make sure that, wherever you go, that you've already gotten the guidance from the CPA on what it is you probably need to want to do. So that's a really good place to start.
Fantastic. And you, Terra, any closing remarks?
I don't have to refer to other states because I can do your taxes anyways. I'm just kidding. I just think, like we were talking about, the overall theme is just I like what you said, Sheryl, as far as understanding the whole picture when you buy a property. It's not just the cost of the property, it's the property taxes, it's the whole scenario. So it's, the grass isn't always greener. You got to make sure you understand what you're going to. So, and I think that's just all the way around in every area. You really need to understand what you're doing.
Gotcha. So, I mean, you laugh, but I want to make sure you're saying you can do taxes in all states. Is that true?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure for anybody that's listening that they would know that.
Yeah.
My closing remark is going to be that when I'm just going to give a short example, I was volunteering in an elementary school for like third graders with homework, and the teacher said to them, use your resources, people, because he was asking them to do their multiplication tables, and there were multiplication tables like on the walls. He said, use your resources. I'm going to give that same message to you. If you're thinking about moving from California, use your resources, use your CPA, use a trusted realtor, use a trusted estate planning attorney. You have trust already established with them. And if you don't have trust already established, you, again, because you want to do your homework before you leave the state of California, you want to establish those relationships so that when you get where you're going, you have a leg up. And referrals are a great way to do things, especially when you have a strong trust relationship already established. So thank you for listening to Women Educating Women. We will be talking about a new topic next month on the third Monday of the month. And I'm going to keep it a secret for right now as to what that's going to be. But be sure to listen in as you hear 3 different perspectives on financial topics. Bye-bye now.